and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. It's everything you need just to walk the scene. And if you wanna make it better, you give it to me, I'll grease it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop, don't let the dream drop hop. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real, and make it yours. Don't stop.
All right, Jen, welcome to the show. When I found out about you, I was so excited because you are literally a woman after my own heart. You have a book out there. It's called Cleanish, which I like because I have literally used that same word when speaking with my clients and my friends and family. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into this lifestyle and what inspired you to write these books that you've been writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to. So yeah, the ish is very important, isn't it?
Yes, totally. Totally.
Well, if we want to go all the way back, I am an elementary school teacher and I'm retired now, but I taught elementary kids for 28 years. And but even before I was a teacher, starting in college, I started struggling with my weight. I went to college, gained the freshman 15, like so many people, and I had never dieted before. And then I came home on a break and I went to a dance class. My mother was a dance teacher. And one of the other dancers said, "Oh, you've put on a lot of weight." And I'm like, "What?" No one had ever said that to me before. So there was the first diet. And that began the diet roller coaster of my life. I grew up with that dance teacher mom and I just saw women diet. That's what we do. Cause I saw that and I'm like, all right, it's my turn now. I'm a woman now. I guess I diet too. So I dieted. I did them all over the years. Literally all of them, probably even the crazy ones that your listeners are like, I was too scared to do that one. Well, I was doing them all. So I started yo-yoing up and down and up and down. And over the years, the yo-yo got higher, right? Like instead of like bouncing around from normal weight, a little bit overweight, normal weight, a little bit overweight, I started bouncing around in the overweight range. And then finally I started bouncing up into the obese range. And it was finally in 2014 that I went on a family cruise with two, teenage boys and my husband, and we were 7 days on the ship, all the food, all the meals, and going through, the Mayan ruins and in the jungle and climbing up the ruins. And I felt so awful in my body. I could barely get my body up those steps. And I felt miserable the whole day. And, looking at the photos also from that cruise, I didn't really recognize myself. So I got home and got on the scale. I hadn't been weighing because I'd pretty much given up. I'm like, I'm just going to be overweight. That's just who I am. I'm just, middle-aged woman. I'm just going to be bigger now. But I got on the scale after that trip and saw 210 pounds. And seeing that, 210 right there on the scale, I was like, all right, maybe I have one more try left in me. So I, had heard of intermittent fasting before, and I had even dabbled in it from 2009 to 2014 every now and then. Because of course I had my eye on any diet there was. I would go to Amazon and scour the diet books and like whatever was number one, if I hadn't read that, I would get it and I would do it. But I was like, I've heard of intermittent fasting. I'm going to just do it. It just seems like it would be the freest way to live because it was all about when you eat and not necessarily what you eat. So I started intermittent fasting and didn't change my diet. I was eating all the foods. I was the typical standard American diet eater with driving through. I was busy. I would get home from work and we would eat something fast. And, amazingly though, this time that intermittent fasting finally stuck, I went on to lose 75 pounds. I didn't quit. That was the main difference. I didn't stop. I had some tools in my toolbox, like I'd read somewhere, to weigh daily and then calculate your weekly average. And so all of a sudden I was doing that. And I no longer was letting fluctuations like get into my mind, like, oh, I'm gaining weight when the scale would go up. But instead I had that weekly average. Every Friday I would look and I would be down and then down and then down. So I finally saw, hey, this is working. And so the difference that time is, like I said, I didn't quit. So I lost the initial 75 pounds I wanted to lose and went on to lose about 5 more over time, over the years. And I have been, declared myself in maintenance in 2015. And here we are in 2022. And I've never had to upsize my clothes due to yo-yoing ever again. Like I've never had to struggle to get weight off ever again. And that is just, it never happened for me before. I always was up and then down and then more up and then a little down. But finally that, I was off that roller coaster. So I was just happily, living the life in the intermittent fasting world. And I'm a teacher. And so I was like, I want to talk to other people about intermittent fasting. And so I started my first, intermittent fasting support group on Facebook, which grew and grew and grew over time till we ended up with almost 500,000 members from around the world in my combined groups. But in the meantime, there was a lot of talk about food. You know how Facebook is, how people will argue about literally everything or anything. Well, if you've got intermittent fasting communities, we're just there to kind of, embrace fasting, but now we're going to argue about what we're eating too. So I was like, there's got to be a best way to eat. So I started really getting more, investigating foods and the effect on our bodies. And I realized, the better I ate, and when I say better, I mean real foods, the more real foods that I ate, the better that I felt. And I also realized along the way, the concept of bio-individuality, which is huge in all of my writing. And that is that we are all different when it comes to what foods work best for our bodies. So really all the arguing was pointless. The people who were, vegetarian and felt great, and people who were keto and felt great, and the people who were, whatever, fill in the blank and felt great, they were telling the truth. That way of eating worked really well for their body. But when you really drill down on every single one of these ways that you could eat, when you really looked at, the origin of all of them, it comes down to real food. So you're eating real food. Like I can recall back in the day when I was doing, low fat. This is in the 90s. I did them all. But when the low fat diets came out, there was a book I read. The first diet book I think I read is called the T Factor Diet. It was a low fat plan. And it was all about how fat makes you fat. So eat less fat. It all made sense. And so I jumped right in, embraced all the products. I basically lived on low fat, ultra processed foods like SpaghettiOs and Snackwells. And that's what I was eating. And I've actually gone back and reread that book now recently. And that is not what his diet is at all. It's eat real foods, just don't eat as much fat. So when we really look at all the diet recommendation of really anybody, there is nobody out there saying you're going to be your healthiest best if you eat a lot of ultra processed foods. Every single pot. No, I've never seen that yet. I mean, there are those crazy researchers who are like, I just ate Twinkies and I still lost weight. So you can do it too. I mean, people like to prove that, you just eat fewer calories, you'll be fine. But really, when you look at healthy dietary plans, there's not a single one out there that doesn't, recommend that you eat real food. So that's really the foundation. I started switching to eating more foods and eating fewer ultra processed foods. I also love that wording, by the way, because we used to just say processed. But now that we've gotten to really understand, processed could be anything from, like, if I get an ear of corn and shuck it and cut the corn off and then whatever, I've now processed it. But I mean, that's still a whole food, right? But, ultra processed would be taking that corn and turning it into corn syrup, totally different thing. So, it's just, the more I started to eat real foods, the better I felt.
So I want to kind of back up. There's so many things that you said there that we can touch on.
I just said a lot of things.
I know. And so I'm super excited about it because I've tried just about everything. I'm a lover of experimentation. So I'm happy to try all sorts of things, except for the ultra processed diet. I think I did that back in the day and I don't want to ever revisit that ever. But so you started on the intermittent fasting. So here's one thing I want to touch on with this. When you started doing the intermittent fasting, my guess is you weren't just eating like 500 calories a day, though, inside of that eating window. Because I think when people hear intermittent fasting, the first thing they think of is, oh, this person's starving themselves. And some people that is their excuse, right? They're like,
Right.
well, I'm intermittent fasting, but then I only eat 1,000 calories in my eating window. And so I just wanted to see what approach you took with that, and why the weight stayed off. Because typically I have found that when people do that, I'm using quotations here, intermittent fasting approach that happens to be them just have an excuse to starve themselves, then
Right.
that's when they are still riding that diet roller coaster, because all that weight comes back.
Yep. And also, you don't, with intermittent fasting, once you adopt it as a lifestyle, you don't want to quit. I have a podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories, and I just recorded episode 201 yesterday, which means I've talked to 201 intermittent fasters over the years who they're all like, I will never quit this lifestyle. So that's really important to know. So, my book that right before Cleanish that came out in 2020 is called Fast, Feast, Repeat. Pay attention to that middle word. It's not fast, then diet a lot in your eating window and then repeat. No, because that is not what we want to do. We definitely do not want to over restrict long term. And the way that I recommend you do intermittent fasting is not through that restrictive paradigm. In fact, we've all been trained with the whole idea, calories in, calories out. That's all that there is to it. But really, the body is very complex. And so if we over restrict through any paradigm, whether it's intermittent fasting or 10 small meals a day, that will cause your body to downregulate your metabolism. So we don't want to do that. So with intermittent fasting, you nourish your body well during your eating window. And it turns out there are some metabolic benefits that you experience during the fast. Now, have you heard me talk about the clean fast or read anything about that?
I have read about it. I haven't heard you personally talk about it.
Okay. No. Okay. Well, the clean fast is actually terminology that we invented in my Facebook support groups back in 2017. It was after my first self-published book came out, and I didn't use the terminology in that book, but we started, really trying to set apart, what we were doing versus, the people who are like, you can put 50 calories of anything. It's fine. Whatever, add this, add that, it's all fine. And so we were like, no, that's not what we believe to be true. So we came up with the terminology, the clean fast, to distinguish, what I recommended and what we were following in my groups to, other types of fasting protocols. So the clean fast, you stick to plain water, black coffee, plain tea during the fast. That's it. So you're fasting clean. And when you fast clean, different things happen in your body. You're better able to tap into your fat stores because insulin is down, which is so important. You want to keep your insulin low because high insulin it keeps your body from burning your fat effectively. It's a storage hormone. So by keeping yourself to plain water, nothing added, no flavors, no flavored coffee, no creamers, no creams. I don't care what you see on that YouTube video about what you can have. I promise you the clean fast matters. If you're fasting clean, your body has no choice but to tap into your fat stores for fuel. And then you start to feel so good. I can remember before I understood the clean fast, how much I struggled, and I was starving all the time and I was hangry, even though I was white knuckling and I was intermittent fasting, but it didn't feel the same way as when I learned how to fast clean. So that makes all the difference in the world. So while you're fasting clean, once your body adjusts to fat burning during the fast, you're well fueled during the fast because your body flips that metabolic switch and is able to tap into your fat stores for fuel. So then when you open your eating window, whenever that may be, you nourish your body well, you actually get back into touch with your hunger and satiety cues. I mean, if you watch a baby knows when to stop eating. I remember when my little boys were tiny babies, they got these lips. When they had enough, they weren't going to have any more. They didn't care if there was another ounce in that bottle or whatever. They didn't care. They're like, I've had enough. I'm not going to have any more food. Their satiety signals were solid. On the other hand, if they were extra hungry, they didn't care that I'd given them the full amount. They still wanted some more. So we're born with working hunger and satiety signals. We just lose track of them over time. Every time we as moms say to our kids, oh, eat just a few more bites, you're teaching your kid to ignore their satiety signals, for example. Or every time if a hungry kid, you're like, well, it's not time to eat yet. Just wait. We're teaching them your own cues don't matter. So if we could figure out a way so our kids never disconnect from their natural signals, boy, what a gift that would be to them. But
Oh,
intermittent fasting has really helped me connect back with mine.
so I love that you kind of talked about that there with the kiddos as well, because that
Right.
is so true. And you want to know the crazy thing? Kids naturally intermittent fast. I mean, I don't know what your experience is. My kids don't eat till noon. And that might seem
Yeah.
crazy, but they literally wake up and they get busy and they're off doing their thing and they don't really
Mhm.
care about food. And sometimes I feel a little bit guilty as a parent, right? Because I feel that's like society's thing. You're not taking care of your kids, but nobody asked for food. So I'm like, cool,
Right.
whatever. I don't have to make this. And then about noontime, my daughter will be like, I'm ready to eat some breakfast. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Exactly.
What do you want to eat?
when you let them guide their hunger. Now, I would never tell someone to put their child on an intermittent fasting regimen, but that is totally different than you letting your child guide you as to when they're ready to eat.
Yeah.
That's ideally that's what we would do.
Well, and society has taught us, right? We need to make them breakfast. We need to do lunch.
Get
we need
your
to
good
do
breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so funny because I always catch myself, even though I know it's perfectly healthy, they'll eat when they're hungry, right? I mean, you never
Right.
read about kids starving to get in the newspaper ever, but like I'll be like, dang, I win parent of the year this year because I didn't feed my kid till noon again. But I mean, if
Well,
they're hungry,
I
they'll let you know.
my 22-year-old is back at home with us for now, so he's eating here at home all the time. But he very much, I was intermittent fasting when he was still in. Let's see, he graduated from high school in 19, so he was, when I started in 2014, you can do the math. He was still like 8th grade kind of age, and so I never forced them to eat breakfast, my boys. And of course, they could also eat at school if they wanted to. So I was like, eat at home, eat at school, do what you want. I don't know when they ate. They just, figured they would eat. But, I wasn't forcing them to eat. And I've never made a big deal about it ever since. And so he, at this point, is really good at stopping with like half a plate of food left because he's had enough. He doesn't feel like he needs to finish it. And I'm like, of all the things you can go back and say, I should have done this better, should have done that better, at least, he's great at listening to his body with food.
Right. I love that. And I loved what you said back there also. I mean, there are a couple things we can dive into so many rabbit holes here, but like children, like we don't actually, other than them with their own natural fasting signals, if you think about it from a young age, like we start getting to older ages, most of society is forcing food on their kids, or they constantly have them eating and they're never eating just a protein meal. I mean, it's very rare that you have a family out there that's just eating meat and vegetables. Typically they're eating snacks that are like super carbohydrate dense. We're feeding them rice cereal when they're babies, or formula. Even formula is so sugary. We don't realize the kind of sugar we're feeding our infants with the formula. Whole nother talk there. But so then as adults, our bodies, I feel, get a little bit confused because they're like, what? Fat? We burn that as fuel? Like we don't
That's
get put into that situation. And so initially when people start trying to do things like intermittent fasting, or they start removing carbs out of their diet, a lot of people are like, oh crap, this isn't going so well to start. And that's because our body it's training it to do a new thing.
Right. We want to be metabolically flexible. We're born metabolically flexible, and as we get older, we're supposed to be able to have that flexibility, meaning your body can switch fuel sources as needed. If you're in the fed state, your body, obviously you fueled it with food, but if no food has come in, you're able to tap into your fat stores and run on that. And we're designed to be like that because, think back to the hunter gatherers. If they didn't eat every 2 hours, do you think they were hangry? No, they knew they were not confused and unable to hunt. They had the stamina to go out and do whatever they needed. So our bodies can kick in that flip that metabolic switch, and we're ready to go. And, I'm not a low carb person. I eat carbs every day, high quality carbs. I eat some ultra processed foods too. That's where the ish comes in. I love crackers and things that are crunchy and salty. I just make sure to get really good quality ones. But my body still flips that metabolic switch when I'm fasting. You don't have to eat low carb to, get into ketosis, for example, once you've depleted your level of liver glycogen sufficiently with your daily fasting. And so you just flip that switch every day. So like I can tell, because I've been doing this a while, I might get a little wave of hunger around, maybe noon. And then I just, all right, thank you, body. That's right when my body's flipping that metabolic switch. And then after that, I feel that mental clarity. from having ketosis, and then I just feel fabulous till I open my window, whenever that might be. It might be at 2, it might be at 4. It just depends on what I'm doing that day.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to touch on, you did mention about insulin being the fat storage hormone. And as a coach, I mean, I run a lot of lab work on people. I want to know what's going on. How can I help this person reach their goals? And people are so individual that it's a great addition. It's another piece to the puzzle to help them get where they need to go. And one of the markers that I always run is their fasted insulin. I want to know.
I'm so glad. That is huge.
People don't realize the kind of tool that is, but I can
huge.
do some things with that. And the crazy, scary part about it is even these people, like, will have these young women that are not obese or overweight, but they need to just lose a few pounds, but they can't. They're like stuck. I mean, it might even only be 5, but they can't get anywhere, and they just don't feel good, and they kind of feel fatigue and heavy. And the thing is that you start looking at this, and I would say 8 out of 10 times, if not more, when I run fasted insulin on somebody, it is elevated. I have yet to see somebody that is down in an optimal range. And
what are you looking for as optimal? I'm curious, because what is quote normal? Like now, like they might say, oh, 8, that's normal, but it's not optimal, right? So what are you looking for?
Well, so I think standard Western medicine says under 10 is normal, which is scary. Is so scary.
It's not good.
Optimal would be under 4. So
right. We're on the same page. I just
okay, good.
To hear you say, because I wanted to make sure we're totally on the same page.
Yeah.
Because people get these tests done and they're like, oh, but I'm normal. I'm like, yeah, but look around. Is normal what you want to be in today's healthy environment, or unhealthy environment, I should say? No, that's not what you want. So,
no. Have
you read Why We Get Sick? Have you read Why We Get Sick?
So Dr. Bickman was actually on my podcast, and we talked, and he's so great. I love him. And so, yes, I've read the book. We've spoken together several times. Amazing literature.
I'm finally listening to it. My co-host on the Intermittent Fasting podcast has had him on her podcast. And so I was like, all right. Someone in my community posted that you could listen to Why We Get Sick on Audible. You don't have to use a credit. If you're like a Plus member, you just get to, I'm like, okay. So I finally started listening to it, and it's just fantastic. But yeah, keeping that insulin low. And I read an article one time. It was in a journal. I can't remember the name of the journal or the article, but it was written, I think, by a nurse practitioner. But the whole premise was, we're testing the wrong thing. Instead of testing A1C, we need to test fasted insulin, and we would be able to stop these problems immediately if we focused on that. Yeah. Anyway, yay. Same page.
And so that's the thing that I try to explain to people when they're sitting in my office chair. I'm like, listen, I don't care what your A1C looks like or what your blood glucose looks like, because what people fail to understand is that our pancreas is working so hard. It's secreting insulin. And yes, it is keeping our blood sugar stable, but that is literally like the harder and harder and harder it works to keep it stable. It's getting tired. It's like running that marathon. And eventually it taps out. And that's when that is when it's recognized as a problem, is once the damage has already occurred. Yes. Now, I don't understand what is so hard about looking at fasted insulin and being like, hey, person, you're in trouble already. And we need to start looking at these things far before you ever have a pre-diabetes or a diabetes diagnosis.
It's the leading indicator of problem is coming. And, I've had people in my community who have asked their doctors for fasted insulin levels. They're like, you don't want that. What? No, you need to. And the doctor doesn't understand. That's not true for all doctors. Obviously, there's some amazing doctors who get it, but they've been trained. We look at blood glucose also, because blood glucose is really so easy you can do it at home. It's, so easy. It was the first thing. Fasted insulin, you can't do that at home.
No. Well, actually, kind of a little bit you can now. I mean, people don't realize that we can run our own lab work. We do not have to go into a doctor. And I think that kind of blows people's mind. But if anybody needs to run their labs, just go to my website, and there's a tab there, and you can order your own, and you can go to the lab and get them and get the results back, because
powerful. And it's not expensive.
No, it's actually far cheaper than going into your regular medical professional because you're not involving insurance and all the things. So, great tool for people, and just that simple test alone is really incredible to understand your health.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I agree.
well, yay. I'm glad and actually just a little side note on that. Recently I ran somebody's fasted insulin and it was 52.
Oh my Lord.
I've
I
never
don't know if I've
seen
ever heard of that.
when I saw it, I had to get a hold of the functional medicine doctor that I work closely with, because I was like, I'm sending someone to you. So
this is above my level of
yes. I was
health.
like, the girl came in my office and I was like, God bless your pancreas.
She needs some fasting.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but so let's talk about Cleanish a little bit. What
Okay.
does that term mean to you, and why is it so important?
You know, as I said, as I started feeling better, I started reaching towards higher quality foods, and it carried over into other areas of my life as well. You know, my co-host for the intermittent fasting podcast is ahead of me on the path to really cleaning things up. She's a lot more into it, even more than I am. She's clean, I'm cleanish. But she like got me down the path of like clean beauty, for example. And I'm like, yeah, what I'm using is fine. And she's like, no, you should just try this. It's really good. I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need to try that. She's like, yeah, but look, it's really better. And they have the never list and all this stuff. I'm like, fine, I'll try it. I tried it. I'm like, okay, it's great. I like it. You're right. And you know, the same with cleaning products. I was like, my cleaning products are fine. Everything's good. You know, I bought a few clean brands, no big deal. And so then, you know, I would have been just coasting along just fine, except that when you write a New York Times bestseller, which I did in 2020, Fast Feast Repeat was a New York Times bestseller, suddenly your editor wants you to write more books. They're like, what you going to write next? What other intermittent fasting book are you going to write? I'm like, I don't want to write another intermittent fasting book. I said everything I wanted to say, and I'm not going to have like, here's a better way to do it, because I said everything I believed already. We don't need, you know, more books about intermittent fasting written by me. And so I was like, what could I write about that would really help people who are going down this path of, you know, feeling better and wanting to feel even better? And I'm like, oh, you know, we could talk about eating mostly clean and living mainly clean and all of that. So I you know, sold it to my editor before I had even started doing the research for it. So then I started researching. Whew. I realized how very greenwashed I had been. You're familiar with the term greenwashing? Yeah. And it was astonishing how many, you know, the cleaning products under my sink were not very clean, even though I thought they were. And, you know, just the more I learned, the more I'm like, okay, the clean beauty matters a whole lot. And the brand I had been using really wasn't good. And so, you know, the farther down the rabbit holes I got, the more I realized, you know, it really does matter. And, you know, I'd been a little lazy here and there. My husband likes to do the shopping. He likes to buy things that are less expensive. So like, I'm like, I know that organic butter is better, but you know, whatever, he bought this, it's fine. So then as I started, you know, researching more, I'm like, you know, really, I do want to lower my toxic load. And it really is more important than I actually was really paying attention to. So the more I researched, the more I was like, it really does matter. And so there are going to be these simple swaps that I can make. Like, you know, we are really only going to use organic butter because the fat of the animal is where all the toxins would be concentrated. So I'm like, every bad choice the farmer made is now like I'm making them by choosing that butter. So by choosing organic butter, very easy swap to make, and know that I'm lowering the level in my toxic load. And it sent me back. Did you read the introduction to Cleanish yet? If you had
I
a chance
did actually. Yes.
The part about my son.
Yeah.
When he was little, we realized that the foods that he ate made a difference. He was very chemically sensitive. And so we had to change the foods he ate, you know, red dye, artificial flavors, artificial colors, artificial preservatives, things like that. He reacted badly to those things. So we cleaned up his diet and my other son's diet. I didn't clean up mine. I didn't have those problems, right? I was eating different food than they were eating. It was ridiculous. But it started to really, you know, remind me, it's like, gosh, you know, we tried to do some cleaner things back then because it made such a difference in my son. And then we kind of got away from that as they got older. So it really inspired me to pull all those tools back out. And I'm a lot more clean-ish, clean even versus the ish than I was, when I started writing the book. And really, it was just a matter of awareness and realizing where I'd been fooled with greenwashing and using the tools, like the brand of cleaning products I was buying. I'm sure you use the Environmental Working Group Healthy Living app to check products. So,
I have Think Dirty on mine.
Yep. Okay.
That's the one I use.
That's a good one. There are a lot of tools out there that do the same kind of a thing. So I started checking the products. And I'm like, I thought this was clean. And then it really wasn't. Like the dish soap I was using was a brand that everyone would probably think was like clean and green because that's how they sell themselves. But like Dawn dishwashing liquid rated higher than the brand I was using. And it's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so same thing, like that's how I initially got down in this health rabbit hole, basically, was because my child, I had started by removing all sorts of things, which eventually led to just trying the GAPS diet, which was a miracle. But yeah. And then the same thing with the I don't know why it never clicked, because here I was perfect nutrition. Like I could not be bothered to ever try your pompous gluten-free crackers. No way,
Right.
But here I was using the cheap, crappy drugstore makeup and all of the Clorox bleach cleaners on my bathroom. And then all of a sudden, like when I was really starting to clean my act up, I got put on a testosterone replacement cream, and all of a sudden that was like all the light bulb I needed to be like, wait a minute, I rub this cream on my skin and it soaks in and gives me hormones. Whoa, what else am I soaking up? And then here we go, rabbit hole again. And now I know more than I should know.
But it's important. And, I'm leading my community through a book study, and we're on week 2 right now. And so they're reading Better Living Through Chemistry, which is chapter 1. And it's kind of scary when you start reading it and realizing, babies are born with these chemicals in their cord blood and coming from the moms, and we're trying really hard, but it's just all out there. So, we can't live in a bubble, but what we can do is make choices that can lower our overall, the level of our toxic load in our bucket. And as people are reading, they're like, this is really scary. I'm like, don't be scared. Every choice you make. And it's really easy once you learn to make them. Once you've, the cleaning products that I use now, they're fabulous, and I don't have to think about it. And they're actually cheaper than the ones I used to buy, because I buy one that's a concentrate and then you mix them yourself with water. So I'm not paying for water, and it's the same concentrate and everything. And you could probably drink it. I mean, I'm not going to, because it wouldn't be delicious, but I don't have to think about it anymore. And I know that when I clean the bathtub and then I fill it up with water and get in it, I'm not worried about what did I just clean this with, and now I'm laying in the water,
Right. Well, and that's a place where so many people get hung up. And I'm sure you've heard this argument over and over again. People are like, why are you being so finicky about this? You just got to live life. You're going to get exposed to this. Or, there's this thing running around on Facebook saying, I don't know what's in my shampoo, and I don't know what's in hot dogs, and I don't know what's in all these things. But I'm like, listen, if you don't know what's in the stuff that you're putting on your skin and in your body and having around you, then shame on you, because you should be knowing what's on there. And control the variables you can control, because you are inadvertently, you are not going to be able to control everything, which we know. And as people that are crunchy moms, I guess you'd call us, right? We know we can't control it all, but we want to control the things that are pretty easy to control. And to me, switching my makeup over, switching my household cleaning products over, eating quality foods makes it so that if I'm out who knows where and I get exposed to something, or who knows what's going on, I don't have to worry about it. It's like, cool. You keep me clean most of the time. I'm not on overdrive. So I'll just handle this for you. No problem. And I think
our bodies are designed to handle toxins, right?
Yes.
They're designed to, but they're not designed to handle as many as we're exposed to and putting in all the time. So if we want our bodies to handle them well, we have to put in fewer, like I talked about before, the bucket effect. Everyone has a bucket. That's how much your body can handle. And once your bucket overflows, that's when you have symptoms. For me, seasonal allergies. I had terrible seasonal allergies. My bucket was constantly overflowing. With intermittent fasting, that really, allowed my body to self-clean during the fasting time. All of a sudden, my bucket was lowered just from the daily fasting time. I no longer had seasonal allergies. So now I'm also putting, fewer toxins on and in my body. There's that bucket going down some more. So your body has room to handle what's coming in. And if you're just in that constant inflammatory kind of a state where your body is like overrun, you're not going to handle anything well. And you're going to have more allergies and inflammation and just feel all these different symptoms, brain fog. I mean, there's a million ways it can come out, but lowering that overall exposure just makes such a difference.
I love that you talked about that. And then also like our liver. So our liver is having to process all of these toxins, but it's also got other jobs as far as like converting our hormones over and things like that. And so a lot of people are all of a sudden finding they're like, oh, well, my hormones are not balanced. I don't know why. Or my thyroid isn't working. I don't know why. Or, there's so many things. Right. And it's like, okay, well, it's probably because it's already got a job to do by working on getting you through all of these foods that are full of stuff and the perfumes you're burning in those candles, and it's working really hard. And it's like, well, what do I do? Do I keep you detoxed, or can I work on your hormones, or what do I do here? So it's like that person that's at a job. I mean, we all can probably relate right now because it's such a hard time with staffing shortages and things, right? But it's like that one person working the whole restaurant because they're so busy they just can't get to everybody's table.
Exactly. And your liver really is working hard. So you need to give it less to do because it has plenty to do on its own. I mean, it makes such a difference. The analogy that I gave in Cleanish was Lucy and Ethel in the chocolate factory. We've all seen that scene when they're working the chocolate factory and then the conveyor belt starts. At first they're handling it, right? And that's your liver. Your liver is Lucy and Ethel, right?
That's funny.
And they are handling it, wrapping the chocolates. Well, the conveyor belt speeds up. And then suddenly they're not handling it. And then it gets faster and faster. Now they're shoving, imagine those chocolates are the toxins. Instead, now they're shoving them in their hat and sticking them in their shirt, and they're eating them. And they're just, by the end, they're like, puffed full up with these chocolates, but that's your body. And so just like Lucy and Ethel at the end of that scene, your body gets, all that puffy inflammation because it just can't handle all the things it needs to do.
I love that. That's a great analogy too. I haven't seen that for a long, long time. So that's funny.
It's a good scene.
It definitely painted a great picture. So what's the first step to becoming cleanish though? And how do we know that we're cleanish enough to actually be moving ourselves in a healthy direction?
Well, really, you have to think of it as a process. And in the book Cleanish, at the end of every chapter, we have a place for you to reflect and or take action. So sometimes you reflect and take action. Sometimes you just take action, but they're different things. My school teacher self comes through in all of this because, we have the information and now you've got to do something. I say in the beginning, change doesn't happen from reading, change happens from doing. So it's really a process that can take as long as you want it to. So first you learn, you're like, oh gosh, there's chemicals everywhere. And of course, when I say chemicals, we know water is a chemical. So I'm not talking about that, the official chemistry definition. I'm talking about clearly toxic chemicals or unusual chemicals or chemicals we may not want to have all around us or in our bodies or on our bodies. So it's first awareness. And then you really, are taking stock of your situation. So like after you read the chapter on, for example, where I talk about personal care products, you actually go look and see what you have. What have I got? How safe are they? What are the things I can't do without? What can I change right now? And I give an example in there, for example, deodorant. We all want to use natural deodorant. I have a little bit of a hard time with natural deodorant 365 days of the year. So today I used natural deodorant. It is January. Natural deodorant works beautifully for me. Well, I live in Georgia. Talk to me in August. There might be a day when I'm going somewhere and I'm wearing a tank top and I might put on some conventional deodorant. And so I know some people would be like, what? You would put that poison? Yes.
Yes, I agree. So I do the same dang thing. I use the natural stuff like 95% of the time. And I don't care if I get a little
Yep.
smelly every once in a while. I mean, I live in the gym and I train people. So cool, whatever.
Right.
Maybe, but there is every once in a while an occasion where if it's like in the summertime and you're gonna have to be close to people, then guess what? I'm breaking out the big guns just because I really don't want to choke the person next to me out.
And I'm not going to lie about it. And I know that. I wish the natural deodorant worked as well for me. And people are like, well, you haven't tried my kind. I'm like, I have tried so many of them. I've probably spent hundreds of dollars on natural deodorant trying to find the one that, but I understand, I keep my bucket as low as I can with what I put in. So using a little bit of regular conventional deodorant is probably not as bad as riding in that Uber with all the air freshener, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, so the funny thing is I go in a public bathroom the other day and I was sitting at the sink washing my hands and there was one of those little fragrance sprayers up there and it was like, psst, and I was like, no, I just got showered with this chemical storm, right? That was all I could think of. And then I was like, you know what? You're good, sister, because it's like you're keeping everything else clean. So you don't have to worry about that one time that you just got completely fumigated with the dang fragrance in the bathroom.
Yeah. But it's the things that we make over the choices we make over time. Like, for example, we just had a flea problem at the house. We got pets, had a flea problem. And you know how tempting it would have been to call in a traditional exterminator and have them come spray all this junk in our house. But I'm like, you know what? No, I don't want to do that. So I researched natural ways. And so we used dichotomous earth. It was messy, but it's food grade. So you could literally eat it and it got rid of the flea problem. So it's just a matter of making those changes when you can. And then when you're bombed in the bathroom,
you're good to go.
Okay. Your body can handle it.
It was pretty bad though. I gotta say, I was like, not this stuff. It just got me.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I like the action taking part of it too. This is how I explain people. I mean, I'm a little on the extreme side. My listeners know that if I decide I want to do something, I just do it. But you don't have to be that way. And I actually did a pretty great job when I started switching out all my beauty products and shampoos and household cleaners and stuff. If I ran out of something, I would replace it with a better alternative. Right. And it happened slowly over time. And then, I mean, it was like a year later, probably, where I looked around and I was like, wow, my house has got a lot of good stuff in it now. I like this. It was really satisfying to see. And it seemed like it happened overnight, even though it took a while.
And, it didn't have to cost $1 million because you did it slowly as you finished something. And again, we assume that better stuff is going to cost more, but that's not always true.
Right. Absolutely. There's a lot of hacks in that department as well, for sure. So yeah. What's another step to becoming cleanish? So, I mean, we talked about slowly kind of removing some things. Is there something that you think the listeners should know that helps them not obsess about things? Because that's the thing. A lot of times people think that us people in the health and fitness space are obsessed and we are keeping things away from ourselves or restricting. And sometimes that's not the case.
Well, I think it's just that you can really trust your body to let you know when you're going down the right path. Like, as I started to make better choices with my eating, I noticed I felt better. And so when I have something that and then I don't feel well after I have it, I can trust my body sending me that signal. And you just really, as you feel better and better, you know that the choices that you're making make a difference. And again, you don't have to make all the changes at once, and perfection is not required. That's the best part. And also, how that we say knowledge is power. As we start to learn these things, though, you can start to get really scared and worried and afraid to go into the public bathroom. And, you might long for ignorance is bliss, which is the flip side of knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. And so now you're like, so much that you're like scared, but, go back to your ignorance is bliss self when you were just going through life, doing whatever, and you weren't worried about it. And so trying to find that happy medium where you're not panicked about things, because we're living in the real world and we can't live in a bubble, but you're knowing that you're making the best choices that you can and that it's a process. It took me a while to finally get rid of my nonstick pans.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, but I really like them and I only use them for eggs. And so then finally, after writing Cleanish, I was like, it really makes a difference. I really need to. So I went out and I found something that works really well for eggs, but is not going to have the toxins in it. And I got rid of, but when you're ready, you'll be ready.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's all about is give yourself grace and let yourself take the time. So you said it took a year and then you looked around and there you were.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to know, for me, the hardest thing, honestly, to get rid of was dang scented candles. I am like a candle burner. I would like light all my whole mantle up every night and my bedroom and the kitchen island. And I mean, dang, it smelled like a Bath and Body Works in this place, I'm pretty sure. And the funny thing is the other day, I actually walked by Bath and Body Works, the mall, and it made me sick to my stomach. And I was like,
yeah.
Whoa, and then I had to burn one candle. I had all of them kind of tucked away underneath of one of my dressers or something in case of an emergency. And we lost power like a few months ago. And so I was like, well, I'll just break out these candles real quick. And that way we'll have some light in the house. And holy crap, they smelled so bad. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm going to go get some regular candles.
It's true. I was riding in my sister's car. I joked about Uber, but I rode in my sister's car this past weekend. We went on a trip. Went to the upstate to see our cousin, and our brother is buying a house with his wife. So we were looking at all that, and we were in the car for like 2.5 hours. And I got in and she's driving because she was going to be hauling some stuff. So I was like, okay, no problem. After we'd been in the car for like 5 minutes, there's her air freshener right there in the car vent. One of those really strong. And I'm like, this is making me feel awful. So I took it out of the vent and moved it, but it was still so bad. I got an immediate headache and I started to feel nauseous. And I'm like, from now on, I have to drive. And I told her, I was like, how can you stand this? Doesn't it make you feel bad? She's like, I don't even notice. And, she doesn't notice.
Right.
But it immediately made my head my nose started to feel inflamed. I started to feel queasy.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's just riding around in that. And I love my sister, don't get me wrong, but she's not interested in being cleanish right now. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people are not feeling their best and they don't know it?
Well, absolutely. And I actually was just explaining this to a client last night. There's this little sawmill town not far from where I live. And it's like a pulp mill and it smells awful
I've smelled those before.
Oh, yes. As soon as you get into that town, you're like, they literally call it like Pewiston, like it stinks.
Yeah.
And it was pretty funny because I was like, listen, when you don't live there for a while or you leave and then you come back to town, you're like, how do people live in this? But the thing is people do, and they don't even notice because they're so used to it. So that's kind of the same thing with these things that we are bombarding our system with.
Right. Absolutely. She doesn't even notice. She said, I don't even smell it. And I'm like, well, it's all I can smell. In fact, when I got home at the end of the day, I was, talking to my husband and my son about it. And I'm like, smell my hair. And it was like, we still smelled it. And I'm like, smell my shirt. And I was like, it was permeating my whole being just from riding in her car for all, maybe 6 hours total. And I was like, this just really reinforces how important it is, because that you could feel it adding to my body burden, and I could feel my body not responding well to it. And, it's really easy for me just to drive next time. No big deal.
Oh man. Yeah. So if there was one thing you could get out to the masses today on this podcast that you want to tell people to be an integral part in their health journey, what would that be?
Start somewhere. Just start somewhere. Maybe you don't want to do intermittent fasting, although I would encourage every adult who is not pregnant or breastfeeding to do intermittent fasting and find a way that works for you. My husband does it. He never needed to lose weight, or, but start with something, whether it's intermittent fasting or whether it's, just changing your butter to organic butter. I mean, every little step you make makes a difference, and then it adds up. And it's cumulative, it snowballs. And then you just start to feel better and better. And as you feel better, you want to make even more changes. And then, I'm 52. I want to feel great when I'm 72, 82, whatever. And I really feel like, now is the time to take care of myself, keeping my insulin low. And I know that my fasted insulin level will remain low because I do intermittent fasting, and I choose foods that work well for my body. So I'm not going to have all those, health conditions that come along with, hyperinsulinemia. And so but you got to take that first step. We're not doing, we're not going to run a marathon tomorrow. You start with couch to 5K and you do a little bit here and there.
Absolutely. And I do love that you said that also, because people think that they just all of a sudden are a diabetic, or they all of a sudden have these major health conditions. And that's not how it works. Those things start manifesting far beyond the time that they are diagnosed. If who knows how long it's been since it's, that been going on before it even gets diagnosed. Right. So these things don't just happen. It's not like, okay, now I'm a diabetic, now I have heart disease, or now I have all these things. There's so many things out there that are involved with diet and stress and lifestyle and all the things. But taking care of yourself now is a safeguard for your future. It's not just when I have the problem, I'll worry about that. Because you hear that a lot. Right. People are like, I just went to the doctor and they said I'm just fine, so I don't need to change anything. And it's like, okay, but how long are you going to be just fine? Right. Continue on with your bad habits.
It's true. And so, I want to live a life that is going to allow me to age well and feel great the whole time I'm alive. I want to feel the best that I can feel. And by taking care of myself now at 52, I have the best tools in my toolbox to do that.
I love that. Well, a wonderful message that you are spreading. If people want to find you, how do they go about doing that?
Well, they can connect with me at jenstevens.com. Jen is Gin, Stevens with a PH. And so go to jenstevens.com. That will connect you to everything from my books to my podcasts to even my community.
I love that. And I'll put all that in the show notes for all the listeners out there to dive into and check out your stuff. I highly recommend your book. Like I said, I haven't been able to finish it just yet, but as soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh, we are peas in a pod.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Well, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure having you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much.